Hi and welcome to my new video. Today I would like to show you a quick demo of Azure Durable Functions. So in the demo I will use 4 different functions, and everything will start with this event handler function that will be triggered by an HTTP call that I will execute from my browser. And inside you can see that I will do 2 different things. The first thing is the call of an entity stateful functions that I called my counter, but in fact it will accumulate some text, don't get it wrong. And I will call 2 different operations. First I will add something to this stateful component, and later I will get it by another call. And the second thing is the use of Orchestrator component of durable function that I will call with this start new method with some unique instance ID, and where I will pass a JSON hellos count parameter, whereas if you check the entity, you will see that I will pass sample scalar value as the parameter. So let's take a look at this entity function first. In this entity function, I have some lorem ipsum text generated previously, and after some calls, this state will become so big that it will not be held anymore in the Azure table, and it will be copied and it will be stored instead in the Azure blob, and the Azure table will only keep the reference link to the blob object. So what I will do here is that if the state doesn't exist, I will get the default value, which will be this string. And later in the add operation, I will repeat this string repetition factor times. And this repetition factor times is hard-coded to 2 in this demo. So I will repeat this text twice whenever I call the add method, and I will append it to the already accumulated state and store it to the Azure and save it in Azure table. With the get operation, I will simply get result and return it to the caller. And when it comes to the orchestrator function, I will get this input. So here you can see that this input is a JSON object. In fact, it's a dictionary, but under the hood it will be serialized to a kind of JSON. So when it comes to the orchestrator function, you can see that this time is a dictionary, and I will get the hellos count parameter and put it into this text that I will pass to the message logger activity function under the name variable. And this name of variable, I will use it later to print, to generate some text, and you will see that this text is also stored in the Azure table. So in order to run this demo, I need 2 things. I need an Azure storage account, and for the sake of simplicity, I will run this storage account on my local machine, and I also need the storage emulator. I will also need the storage explorer just to see what's inside the Azure storage emulated on my local machine. So I will start this storage emulation from my Visual Studio, because initially I wanted to make all this demo directly here, but PyCharm was more convenient. And I also need to start the storage explorer, and we have to wait a bit, yes. And our emulator that will be used by the other function is here. So now I can start all the functions and grab my HTTP calls to trigger the function. So all is up and running, and the ID of my function will be 353, and the hellos count will be 5. So I called it already the first time. So you can see 3 different things. The first thing is that we have some starter object, and the starter object is the whole context for the orchestrator, and we can see that we are using it here as a JSON, and the starter object defines the Azure storage, among other things, by the way, that will be used by the function to store the state, to exchange the messages, and so forth and so on. So we have here, we have some invocations. Yeah, we have one error that I was not aware of, but as far as I know, it's not critical. And we have our input, the logs, some logs that I added already before, like starting new orchestrator should be somewhere. Yeah, you can see that we're starting new orchestrator for this orchestrator ID. And that we can also notice here the execution of our entity function. Entity function with this accumulating the state x2 log. And let's see now what we have in the storage explorer. So in the storage explorer, the thing will be interesting for us so far is this and this table. So in this table you can see that's all of these are my previous tests, so maybe I will just filter it on the partition key. So that's the result of the orchestrator. So, and you can now observe different things. You can, for example, observe that we are passing the input parameters to the orchestrator when the execution starts. You can also observe that we are generating some results from the orchestrator in the last step. So we are generating it directly here. And you can also observe that we are printing the result of each activity whenever the task completes. So the task, just to recall, the activity is very straightforward. It looks like that, and this information is stored in the orchestrator as the state. And obviously you can also find different states of the execution with these event types. So let me sort it by this, so we can see, yes, that we started the execution, we started the orchestrator, later we scheduled the first task, we scheduled the second task here with the orchestrator started, and by the end we accumulated the results generated by these two activities, and we completed the orchestration with the final text execution, orchestrator execution. Okay, and what we have here? Here is the state table. So here it's not something we will need. So yeah, here you can find our counter free. That was updated at that time, and as you can see, that stores the state directly in the row so far, because the size the size of the state is smaller than the threshold. But let's see what happens if I run this once again. So I will refresh the state table. You can see that the counter 333 still has this state inside, and now I will run this once again, and let's see if something changed between. Indeed, yes, you can see that the state is not represented, is not present anymore as this JSON. Instead, it's only a reference to some object in Azure Blob. So I will maybe try to find this object and see if I can get something from it. So test hub name, dev store account 1. Okay, yes, that's the blob. I had it to refresh it, and you can see that we have our state, which is stored here as a compressed JSON file. And what we have inside is that we retrieve we retrieve exactly the same format as previously in Azure table, but you can see that there is much more value, and this value is too big to be stored directly in the table. So that were two things I wanted to show you in this demo. So the first one was this state storage for the entity functions, and the second one was this orchestration flow for the orchestrator followed by activity functions. And if you want to discover other details of Azure Durable Functions framework, I invite you to the article which is linked in the description of this video. It was Bartosz Konieczny from waitingforcode.com. Thanks for watching.